Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a world without toothpaste clocks or toilet paper, where your entire life is confined to a patch of mud you'll never leave. And no, I don't mean jury duty. You're going to live the full, ordinary, often brutal, but sometimes weirdly charming life of a medieval peasant from the moment you squeal into the smoky air of a one-room cottage to your final breath by the hearth you once crawled beneath. You'll freeze, you'll itch, you'll probably get lice before you get a name, and if you're lucky, you'll survive long enough to tell a couple bad jokes about the miller. You probably won't survive this life. In fact, almost no one did past age 35. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born feet first, which everyone agrees is bad luck except the old midwife who shrugs and says it just means you'll be good at climbing trees, or falling out of them. Your first breath is drawn in a room that smells like wet straw chimney soot and something uncomfortably close to goat urine. The thatched cottage only has one room, and you're sharing it with 7 other people. 2 chickens and a dog with a suspicious limp. Your mother screams, your father prays, and the neighbor woman dashes over with hot water that's mostly just hot mud. Welcome to the world. There's no cradle. You're tucked into an old drawer lined with fleece pushed close to the hearth, where the embers glow orange and flicker like spirits. A wooden cross hangs crooked above the fireplace. No one says your name out loud until the priest does, because naming a baby before it survives the week, that's just tempting fate. And fate is moody in this village. You're born during Lent, which means your mother gets no meat and barely any butter while trying to feed you. She's pale, she's exhausted, and she's already back to work spinning flax by the time your umbilical stump falls off. That's not metaphorical, by the way. Medieval women were literal machines when it came to labor. Your father, a man who smells like turnips and old leather, holds you awkwardly like he's afraid you might explode. His main goal right now is making sure you survive long enough for the priest to splash you with holy water and give you a fighting chance against whatever demons they think lurk in your left ear. Baptism is a race against death. Historically, up to half of all infants didn't make it to age 5, so they don't get too attached. Your swaddled tight arms straight at your sides, legs bound wrapped like a flour sack, and laid next to the fire where someone can keep half an eye on you while darning socks or butchering a goose. By the time you're 3 days old, you've already had your first accidental taste of ale. It's safer than water, a dollop of honey on your tongue to keep you quiet, and maybe even a sprinkle of salt in your mouth to drive out sin. This was a real custom, by the way. Salt for purification, or seasoning. It's unclear. The cottage walls are daubed with clay and straw painted with whitewash that peels in the damp. Smoke leaks from the hearth and hangs in the air like a foggy ceiling. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, and if it rains, someone plugs it with a chunk of wool. You're learning to breathe through a wheeze already. A cat prowls near your little drawer bed, watching you like you might turn into food. Your siblings poke your face with fingers sticky from boiled onions and leftover porridge. The dog snores, one eye open, tail twitching in your general direction. There's comfort in the chaos, a kind of accidental warmth. Outside the village stirs in early spring slush. Chickens strut. The reeve counts sacks of barley. Someone shouts about a lost pig. Inside you hiccup once, then fall asleep to the rhythm of spinning wheels and the soft clatter of wooden spoons. It's not peace exactly, but it's life. Barely. Historians still argue whether peasant births were always attended by a midwife or just whoever wasn't drunk at the time. But one thing is certain, your arrival won't be recorded in any book. No scroll, no family crest, no painted portrait, just the faint memory in your mother's eyes, and maybe a scratch on the wall to count the days you've made it so far. Your name when it comes is probably John or Alice or William or Margaret. Saints' names, easy to carve into a cross. The priest mutters Latin as he pours water over your head, and the villagers all pretend this makes you safer now. Spoiler, it doesn't. But for tonight, you're safe. Swaddled. Snoring. Gently baking by the hearth like a sleepy loaf of bread. You're still swaddled tight as a sausage in a linen wrap, and for the first several weeks of life, you barely move. Your arms don't flail, your legs don't kick, and your mother unwraps you only long enough to rub lard on the rash that's definitely not going away. She tucks you back in, muttering about cold drafts and the devil crawling up baby toes. This is how you spend your earliest months bound, bounced, and burped beside the hearth. There's no such thing as a quiet nursery. The same room where you sleep is where people argue, knead dough-sharpened blades, and relieve themselves in the corner bucket. Your mother nurses you when she can, but she's busy. She's always busy. So she shares the task with your older sister, who's only 9, but already has arms like firewood bundles. She dribbles goat milk into your mouth while crooning some half-remembered saint's song. It's oddly soothing. Sometimes when the goat milk runs low, they feed you bread boiled in water known as pap or panada. This medieval baby food is about as nutritious as chewing on a damp cloth. But you gum it with all the enthusiasm of someone who doesn't know any better. You don't. You're 3 months old. You once tried to eat a feather. Your cradle, if you can call it that, is now a wicker basket suspended from a ceiling beam with a bit of rope. They rock it with their feet while churning butter or weaving hemp. The motion keeps the rats guessing. That's a good thing. Rats are not above nibbling. When you fuss too loudly, someone sprinkles powdered henbane or poppy milk on your lips. Yes, that's right. They drug babies in the Middle Ages. Not every family could afford poppy, of course. Some just whispered prayers or tapped you lightly on the forehead and hoped you'd fall asleep before the firewood ran out. And when winter comes, and it comes fast, you're bundled in wool scraps and sheepskin layered like a lasagna of fabric passed from warm lap to warm lap. No one's worried about your comfort. They're worried about your survival. Your mother counts your breaths at night. If you stop wheezing, she shakes you. Hard. You grow slowly. Like a cabbage left too long in a shadowy patch of dirt. Your legs are bowed from swaddling. Your belly sticks out from malnutrition. But you smile. Because you don't know any better, and honestly, there's a chicken staring at you like it wants to share a joke. Outside, the village trudges through rain and mud. Inside, you're teething on a bit of boiled leather, and your grandmother swears the pain means you'll be clever one day. She also swears bees live in your ears and dreams can crawl down your throat, so take that with a handful of salt. Speaking of salt, They rub some on your skin to strengthen you. It's part healing practice, part superstition, and part we ran out of better ideas. You scream, obviously, but they interpret that as a good sign. Lungs like that, you might live to see your second birthday. At 6 months, you're placed on a little rug made of woven reeds and discarded lamb's wool. This is your royal domain. Your tiny empire of crumbs, spilled ale, and the occasional beetle. You grab whatever's in reach, usually a wooden spoon, sometimes a toe, and wave it like a scepter. Your speech begins as babble, gurgles and squeaks. Occasionally someone claims they hear you say amen or ale, which is enough to warrant a clap and a crumb of cheese. Language will come slowly. No one expects much. If you know 10 words by age 2, you're practically a scholar. At around 1 year, you're dipped without ceremony into a bucket of cold water behind the cottage. This is your first real bath, and it's less about hygiene and more about rinsing the mud out of your eyebrows before someone important visits. The cold shocks you into a shriek, but you're also finally clean enough to look vaguely human. For now. Historically, bathing infants was controversial. Some believed it was necessary for health. Others thought it opened the body to demons. As with most things in medieval life, logic took a back seat to folklore, and whatever your grandmother's neighbor's cousin swore worked. You're also now watched closely for signs a twitch could mean you're cursed. A lazy eye might suggest a fairy changeling. A laugh at the wrong moment. Well, now people are lighting incense and muttering Hail Marys. Childhood isn't a playground. It's a spiritual obstacle course. Your godparents stop by once a month. They pinch your cheeks, give you a tiny linen cap that doesn't fit, and offer advice no one listens to. They're responsible for your soul, not your socks. Meanwhile, your mother's pregnant again. She's always pregnant again. You don't know this, of course, but one day soon you'll be replaced as the baby and shoved into more serious duties, like crawling after chickens and learning not to eat candles. The dog still limps. The chickens still strut. The hearth still smokes. And you blissfully unaware of feudal law crop rotation or plague gurgle into a wooden bowl and try to bite it. Hard. You won't remember these years. No one does. But they'll leave a mark in your bones, your posture, and the way your fingers twitch whenever someone lights a tallow candle, because that smell will always mean bedtime warm soup and someone humming out of tune beside the fire. You're 2 years old now, and you've mastered 2 things, waddling upright and yelling at sheep. You can't pronounce your own name yet, but you can shout no with the conviction of a bishop. Your legs wobble like twigs in a breeze, but you insist on walking everywhere, even straight into puddles mud, and once, disastrously, the compost heap. That particular mistake earns you your first real bath since last winter. Ice-cold water, a lumpy rag, and a prayer that you don't catch something from the duck feathers floating by. There are no toys in the modern sense. You play with sticks, rocks, beetles, and occasionally someone's boot if they leave it unattended. A dried pig bladder becomes your favorite ball. It squeaks when you bite it. Your mother does not find this cute. Language starts tumbling out now half-formed words and lopsided phrases. You call the village priest Big Hat and your grandfather the Loud Snore. Everyone laughs except the priest. He's still recovering from the time you threw turnip mash at his vestments. Your first real education doesn't come from books. It comes from mimicking. You watch your older siblings sweep the floor with bundled twigs and try to copy them, except you mostly just swirl dirt into new patterns. Still, it's the effort that counts. Your mother starts giving you small tasks, very small. You're asked to shoot chickens from the hearth or collect kindling. Sometimes you're sent to find eggs, but you mostly just sit in the coop and talk to the hens like they're old friends. You're still wearing a simple tunic, just a long shirt, really, that's been patched so many times it looks more like a quilt. Underwear. Don't be ridiculous. The breeze handles that. The floor is your playground, dirt, straw, and the occasional beetle. There's a stick you like to chew, a bowl you like to wear on your head. And once you tried to ride the family dog like a noble steed. He didn't appreciate it. You still have the scratch. Around age 3, you're officially baptized again. The first one didn't count for much since everyone assumes babies are halfway to heaven already. But now you're a soul with legs. You're walked to the village church in your cleanest rags, your hair combed with a bone comb, and your cheeks rubbed with lard to make you rosy. The priest chants. The congregation hums. You fidget and yank the candle out of its holder. The wax spills. Your mother swats your hand. Ceremony complete. Historically, it's unclear when peasant children were considered full people. Some historians argue children weren't really seen until age 7. Others think communities celebrated early childhood more than we assume, but quietly, modestly, without much expectation. Because too many didn't make it. You're lucky. Your belly's round from porridge, not parasites. Your cough comes and goes. And your mother still sings to you at night, low and scratchy, like a lullaby carved from wood. By 4, you're deemed useful, which in medieval terms means you can now work. Your first job is crow scarer. You're given a clapper made from sticks and a ragged cap that used to be a mitten. You walk the edge of the barley fields, shouting nonsense and waving your arms. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the crows just stare at you, judging your form. You return home at sundown with dirty feet, sunburned cheeks, and a suspicious amount of feathers in your tunic. Your mother checks for ticks. Your father mutters about lazy birds. Your siblings steal your leftover bread. And then, of course, there's church. Every Sunday, and the occasional feast day, you're hauled to Mass. You don't understand a word of it, but you know how to kneel, mumble, and pretend you didn't just pick your nose. The priest smells like wax and onions. The candles flicker. You think God lives somewhere in the rafters. You're also taught simple prayers. Pater Noster, Ave Maria, and the all-important, don't touch the relic cabinet. You mostly remember the last one. Sometimes the local friar visits and tells stories. Tales of saints who grew wings or battled dragons. You think St. Cuthbert was a goose. You tell everyone this. The friar looks tired. Home life is a cycle now. Wake, eat, shoe animals, spill something, work, get scolded, sleep, repeat. But within that rhythm, you begin to notice things the way the light shifts on the reeds at dusk, the sound of the wind across the thatch, the hollow hush after snow. You're growing. Not fast and not tall, but strong. Your fingers are calloused from hauling bundles of sticks. Your toes know every rock in the path to the fields. And your laughter. It echoes through the village like a prayer that accidentally tripped and fell in the mud. And despite the fleas and the hunger, and that time you got stuck in the goat pen, there is joy. Small, muddy, irreverent joy. You are not yet beaten by the world. You still run without purpose, still sing to bugs, still believe the moon follows you when you walk. And that belief, that soft glow in your chest, it's the last light of early childhood. Soon, very soon, the world will ask more from you. It always does. You're 4 years old now, and you have a job. Not the pretend kind where you help stir porridge for fun. No, you are officially, undeniably, irreversibly working. You've got a clapper made from 2 wooden paddles tied together with string, and your task is simple: scare the crows out of the barley. And if you're wondering, yes, this is a job even the birds laugh at. At dawn, you're nudged awake by your older brother's foot. You blink at the low-beamed ceiling stretch under a rough wool blanket that smells faintly of damp straw and goat, and crawl out into the smoky morning light. Outside, the mist hangs low over the fields. Your tunic is still damp from yesterday. No one thought to dry it by the fire. You pull it on anyway and stuff a crust of yesterday's bread into your mouth as your mother hands you your clapper and sends you on your way with a whispered, "Try not to fall asleep in the grass again." You trudge through the muck shoes tied with bits of twine and reach your assigned patch of field. The barley's just sprouting green tufts in dark earth, and there they are, the enemy. 5 fat crows perched on a fence post, watching you like you're part of the entertainment. You bang your clapper. They scatter briefly. You shout something vaguely terrifying. They return. This is your life now. Most days, no one comes to check on you. Occasionally, another kid joins you, and you take turns pretending your clappers are swords. But mostly, it's just you, the wind, and birds that are definitely smarter than you are. But the work has meaning. You're a part of the machine now, the great creaking, wheezing, coughing engine of peasant labor. The barley survives because of you. Probably. At least that's what your father says when he's in a good mood. And your responsibilities don't end there. At home, you're expected to help gather dung, yes, dung. Cow-sheep horse. Dried, crumbled, and hauled to the edge of the field to enrich the soil. You carry it in a basket nearly as big as your torso, and the smell never leaves your hands no matter how long you scrub them in the creek. But there's pride in it. Kind of. The older kids nod at you now. You're no longer just the little one. You're the smelly one who helps, which is an upgrade. You also fetch water barefoot uphill with a wooden bucket that leaks if tilted the wrong way. You learn the best times to avoid the neighbor's goose, he's territorial, and which patches of path are too slippery when it rains. You also learn the exact sound of your mother's voice when you spill half the bucket. Clothing. Still the same, a single tunic, often damp, occasionally itchy, always patched. Your shoes are leather if you're lucky, bark-wrapped cloth if not. You cry the first time a thistle gets you through the sole. You don't cry the second time. Meal times are brief and quiet. You eat pottage barley boiled with onions, leeks, and whatever else survived last week. Meat is rare. You dream of honey. You chew slowly, eyes on the table ears, tuned to adult talk about weather debts and the Reeves' annoying new wife. Historians still argue whether peasant children were truly part of the household economy or simply tolerated appendages until they grew tall enough to haul firewood. But in your case, there's no debate. You're useful now, and usefulness equals survival. You're also learning to listen, not just with your ears, but with your body, the way the wind shifts before rain, the strange quiet when a fox prowls, the warning tone in your mother's voice that says, "Don't test me right now." There's not much formal affection, no hugs, no kisses, no lullabies anymore. But when your father ruffles your hair in passing, it feels like being knighted. When your mother slips you an extra scrap of cheese, it's a declaration of love. Your hands start to toughen. Your knees are always scabbed, and your belly, though often empty, learns to settle for what it's given. You don't complain, not out loud. Complaining gets you chores. Silence gets you bread. One afternoon, a traveling friar passes through the village and tells stories to the children. You sit at the edge of the group, legs crossed, heart pounding. He speaks of Saint Benedict, of dragons, of miracles. You believe every word. The friar gives you a scrap of parchment with a single letter on it. You don't know what it says, but you carry it for weeks in your tunic like it's treasure. Eventually, it disintegrates in the rain. That's your first brush with literacy. And then one day it happens, your first beating. It's not cruel, not personal. Just routine. You dropped the firewood, or fed the dog instead of your sister, or let the crows eat too much barley. Your father cuffs you behind the ear. It stings. Your pride bruises more than your skin. But later that night he hands you a slice of apple and grunts, "Watch the seeds. Don't choke," which is his way of saying, "I still love you." You don't sleep much these days, not because of nightmares, but because your legs ache. Growing pains, they say. Or maybe it's just all that running in circles, chasing birds and siblings and rats from the grain. You fall asleep one night listening to the sound of the wind against the shutters, the fire snapping low, and your sister softly weeping into her blanket. No one asks why. Everyone already knows. In the morning it all begins again. You are 4. You are tired. And you are against all odds still alive. You're 5 now, maybe 6. No one is quite sure. Birthdays aren't counted here, not unless you're a noble with a crest, a scroll, and a scribe. For peasants like you, time is marked by seasons, not candles on a cake. Your world spins on the wheel of the year, lambing in spring, haymaking in summer, threshing in autumn, and huddling for warmth in winter. These are your months. This is your calendar. Spring means wet feet. The thatch leaks. The mud climbs your ankles, and the sheep won't stop giving birth at night when no one wants to be outside. You chase lambs through brambles with a stick, scrape manure from the stalls, and help your sister carry new straw to line the pens. You're small but quick, and that matters. Summer arrives like a blessing and a curse. You're up before dawn, eyes gritty with sleep, carrying bundles of hay taller than you are. The sun beats down on your head while the insects find every patch of exposed skin. But the fields shimmer gold, and the air smells like bread, and sometimes you forget how hard the work is. You splash in streams, catch frogs with other children, and steal bites of warm bread from your sister's basket when no one's looking. There's laughter, too, silly, breathless, innocent. Not everything is burden. Then comes autumn, harvest, the big test. Everyone works. Everyone. Old men with canes, women nursing infants. You swing a sickle that's too big for your hand, cutting stalks as best you can. Your palms blister, your back cramps. But you do it, because harvest is everything. What you reap now is what you'll eat later or not eat if the rats beat you to it. The threshing floor becomes your schoolroom. You learn to swing the flail without hitting your own shins. You learn to separate grain from chaff. You learn that if you drop the basket, you sweep the whole floor, twice. And when the grain is finally hauled to the manor's barn, the bailiff stands by with a ledger and a grim face. You watch as your father hands over the first best portion what's owed to the Lord. No arguing, no pleading. It's custom. You ask why. He doesn't answer, just mutters something about rent debt and staying on the land. Historians still argue whether this system was as crushing as it sounds. Some claim peasants had more autonomy than we assume. Others believe the weight of obligation hung so heavy it bent generations at the spine. You just notice your father's silence. Winter crawls in like a thief. The daylight shrinks. The hearth burns low. Food stretches thin. Your mother boils bones for broth. You chew on stale bread until your gums ache. Sometimes you pretend it's cake. It helps. You sleep beside your siblings on a bed of straw and rags huddled like spoons. You dream of warmth but wake to frost on the inside of the shutters. Sometimes your breath clouds in the dark like a ghost escaping your mouth. But there's also joy in winter. Storytelling by the fire, hot stones tucked into blankets, candle shadows dancing on the walls like spirits with no place to go. And the festivals. Oh, the festivals. On St. Martin's Day, someone slaughters a pig and the village feasts. You get meat, real meat, your first in months. It's salty and fatty and perfect. You lick your fingers clean and dream of more. On Christmas, you sing carols outside the manor. The steward tosses coins and bread from the window. You scramble in the snow, laughing, slipping, shouting. It feels like magic. Briefly. By now, you've also been to a few funerals. Quiet, muddy affairs. You don't understand everything, but you know what it means when someone stops waking up. You ask where they go. Your mother says, to rest. Your grandmother says, to the Lord. Your sister says, to the same place we'll all end up. You don't ask again. You've also seen your first priestly procession incense bells, Latin chants you don't understand. But the smell of frankincense clings to your tunic for days, and you breathe it in like it might make you holy by accident. Meanwhile, your hands grow stronger. Your stride lengthens. You can carry 2 buckets now instead of 1. You can help mend fences, stack firewood, and catch runaway hens without looking like a fool. You're becoming competent, and that earns you a kind of respect. The neighbors nod. The reeve stops calling you the little one. Your father lets you walk the fields alone. You take pride in that, even as the wind numbs your fingertips. You're still a child, but childhood here is more of a tapering echo than a distinct age. You laugh less, listen more. You know which berries are safe, which mushrooms kill, and which pond the pigs like to wallow in when no one's watching. At night, you stare at the rafters above your bed, tracing the patterns of old spider webs, and wondering if saints ever get bored. You think maybe heaven has a lot of hay and no chores. You hope so anyway. You've lived long enough to feel seasons not as scenery, but as instructions. Spring means lambs. Summer means sweat. Autumn means hope. Winter means holding on. And through it all, you remain small, in stature, in voice, but not in spirit, because somewhere between hauling hay and humming carols, you've learned that survival is its own kind of honor, and you wear that like a badge even if it's stitched from rags. You're around 7 now, though. Again, no one's exactly sure. There's no candlelit cake, no embroidered tunic to mark the moment. Just a nod from your father and a shift in your chores. You're big enough to take the oxen out now. Carefully, slowly. Don't let them drag you. You've reached the age of first responsibilities and first lessons that bite. Your feet are tougher than they used to be, leathery from endless paths between pasture cottage and field. Your hands are rough, too. The nails chipped your knuckles, always healing from something sharp, splintered, or slightly alive. Childhood has softened into something leaner, sharper, and now it's time to learn about God. Once or twice a week, depending on the weather and whether the priest's gout is flaring up, you're sent to the little church school by the chapel, a thatched, windowless building that smells like old wax and wet dog. You're not excited. Inside, it's cold in winter and hot in summer, and you sit on a bench with a dozen other boys who smell like turnips, feet, and fear. The priest's assistant teaches with a stick and a shout, and the only book in the room is chained to the wall. Literally chained. No one's risking theft, even for psalms. You're taught to repeat Latin phrases by sound pater noster qui es in caelis, without the faintest idea what any of it means. But the rhythm is comforting. Like a song that doesn't need understanding. You mouth the words with trembling lips and try to avoid eye contact with the priest who smells strongly of onions and long walks. You learn the alphabet carved into a wooden board. A is for Agnus Dei. B is for Benedictus. C is for Cruciatus, which doesn't get explained, but the tone makes you think it's bad. Occasionally, a rat scuttles across the rafters. Everyone stares up. The priest doesn't flinch. He just keeps reading, droning, always droning. Learning is not about curiosity here. It's about memory and obedience and not getting whacked for sneezing too loud. The girls don't attend. They're expected to learn at home how to spin, to sew, to stew, to stay quiet. Your sisters can't read, but they can measure barley by sight and weave a linen thread so fine it makes your eyes water. But you might one day be a reeve or a steward's clerk. Or if the saints smile and the fleas don't kill you, first a monk. That dream lasts about a week until you realize monks get even less sleep than you do. Back home, you're also getting lessons from life. You're taught to make cord from hemp, to mend a leak in a roof using moss and spit, and to spot the difference between a healthy pig and one that's going to drop dead during Mass. You learn these things not in order, not neatly, but when needed. And they stick. You also start to understand justice, or at least how it works in your corner of the world. If you steal a chicken, you lose a finger. If the Lord's hound kills your duck, you get nothing but a shrug. The rules are clear. They just don't always favor you. One day, a boy in the next village loses an ear for poaching rabbits. You don't see it happen, but you hear the story repeated enough times that it becomes a kind of myth. His name is whispered like a warning. You stay out of the woods, mostly. You're also learning pain in new ways. Not just skinned knees or cracked lips, but deep, quiet aches that come from disappointment, from being scolded unfairly, from losing the pet piglet you weren't supposed to name. You did. It was Soot. And yes, someone ate him. At Mass, you start to understand the stories a little more. The parables, the lessons. The priest still drones, but now you hear meaning tucked between the incense and candlelight. You're told God sees everything. That makes you nervous. Still, the church offers a strange kind of peace. A space where the smoke isn't from the hearth and the silence isn't broken by goats. You sit on a cold bench, fingers laced, head bowed, pretending you're listening. Sometimes you are. And then there's the beatings. They're more common now. You're expected to know better, whether it's a missed chore, a broken tool, or simply being slow with the kindling punishment comes quick, sharp, usually with a stick or a belt of old leather. But it's not all cruelty. Your father isn't a monster, just tired. Always tired. When he catches you crying after a lashing, he doesn't say a word. Just hands you a scrap of dried apple and walks away. It's the closest thing to an apology you'll get. And it's enough. Despite everything, you still laugh. You chase the dog until he growls. You splash in puddles when no one's looking. You tell stories about the Reeves' ugly hat and get your friends to giggle so hard they nearly fall in the ditch. You dream too. You dream of being a falconer, of owning your own oxen, of marrying the baker's daughter even though she threw mud in your eye last week. Hope lives in small places here. And through it all, the seasons keep turning. The barley grows. The sheep bleat. The snow returns. You grow taller, quieter, sharper. Your mother teaches you how to tell when someone is lying. Watch the eyes, she says. Your father teaches you how to split wood cleanly with one swing, no waste. Life teaches you how to endure. And as you fall asleep each night, limbs sore, mind buzzing with half-remembered chants and chores, you whisper the only prayer you truly understand. Let tomorrow come. You're 10 years old, give or take, and everything about you smells stronger. Your feet, once muddy little paws, now reek like old cheese left in the sun. Your armpits have begun brewing something terrible, something ancient, something that could probably be weaponized in a siege. You scratch more. You grunt more. And you're starting to get strange looks from the village girls, half amusement, half horror. Welcome to adolescence medieval style. It's not glamorous. There's no talk of growing pains or coming of age here. You just get taller, louder, and more responsible whether you're ready or not. Your voice cracks when you try to shout across the fields. Your knees creak after a long day stooping over beets. One day you notice dark smudges under your arms. You ask your father. He shrugs and says, "Wash better." That's the whole talk. Your chores multiply. You're now allowed, no expected, to join the older men in the heavier labor. Plowing, hoeing, lifting, lugging. You carry sacks of grain so heavy they leave bruises on your collarbones. You learn how to shoe a mule without losing a finger, how to sharpen a scythe until it sings, and how to listen for thunder not because it's pretty, but because it ruins hay. In summer you sweat so hard your tunic sticks to your back like a second skin. In winter, your breath comes out in little white puffs while you chop wood until your fingers go numb. There's no such thing as a day off. If you can stand, you can work. Still, there's something satisfying about it. A rhythm, a power. You feel your muscles hardening. You feel yourself becoming something sturdier, more rooted, less afraid of the world. You also start to notice your peers in a different way. The village girls braid their hair in loops, now wearing ribbons they traded for at the summer fair. They tease you when you pass by, pretending not to notice how red your ears get. You throw a clod of dirt in retaliation. It hits a goat. Everyone laughs. Your best friend brags he kissed a girl behind the hayloft. You call him a liar. He probably is. But you still spend a little more time near the mill, just in case someone's waiting there with a secret smile and hands that smell like bread. And then comes your first toothache. It starts as a dull throb in your jaw, easily ignored. But after a few nights, you're grinding your teeth in your sleep and waking up with tears on your cheeks. Your mother gives you a cloth soaked in vinegar. Your grandmother gives you a clove to chew. Your father gives you a look that says, "Don't make a fuss." Eventually, the village healer, the same woman who pulled a nail from your foot last year with a rusty hook, offers to take care of it. Her tools include a bit of string, a fire-heated blade, and a wooden cross to bite. You wake up without the tooth. You don't remember much else. But the pain's gone. Mostly. Historians still argue whether medieval dental care was as horrific as it sounds. Some point to monasteries with early surgical tools. Others say most people simply endured until the tooth rotted out on its own. Either way, you're grateful to chew again on one side at least. You're also allowed into the alehouse now not to drink, but to sweep carry jugs and listen. The grown-ups don't mind you hanging around as long as you keep your mouth shut and your hands off the bread. You sit in the corner and soak up their stories like spilled beer in straw. You hear tales of wars far away, of kings who went mad, of monsters in the woods and angels in the sky. One man swears he saw St. George himself near the old abbey ruins. Another claims he once wrestled the devil under a moonless sky. You don't believe half of it, but you listen. Because their stories stitch the world together, and because someday you'll want your own. And there's music, too. A traveling fiddler comes through the village once every few months. He plays tunes that make even the miller's grumpy wife tap her foot. You clap a long breath caught in your chest, wishing for something you don't have words for. Maybe a different life. Maybe just a moment longer where nothing hurts and everything is sound. You begin to understand the manner better, the hierarchy of it all. The steward, the reeve, the bailiff, the lord. You watch your father bow. You watch your neighbors pay tithes, taxes, and penalties with clenched jaws. You hear whispers about rebellion in other shires, murmurs of uprisings and punishments. But here things stay quiet. Your dreams shift. You no longer want to be a falconer or a knight. Now you want a sturdy roof, a cow of your own, and maybe land. Just a strip of it. Something to pass on. You lie awake sometimes, hands folded behind your head, eyes on the rafters, imagining a better hut, a warmer hearth. A life where your own children don't have to share a straw bed with 3 siblings and a chicken. You don't tell anyone, but you dream it anyway. And through it all, the seasons still turn. Your body keeps growing. Your voice deepens. Your shoulders broaden. You begin to cast a longer shadow on the earth that raised you. And somewhere between your first toothache and your first whispered prayer that doesn't come from the priest, you realize you're no longer just surviving childhood. You're surviving yourself. You're 12 now, or maybe 13. The lines blur. Time doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly into your joints, your stride, the way people stop calling you boy and start expecting you to lift the full sack on your own. This year, you dance at your first May Day. The village green is muddy, but the ribbons are bright red, blue, and gold fluttering in the wind like promises no one can keep. You're handed one of them paired with a girl who smells like wild garlic and sheep's wool and told to circle the pole without tripping over your own feet. You nearly do. Twice. But you laugh through it, and she doesn't let go of your hand, and by the end, your heart's beating faster than it should for something that involved skipping. Afterward, there's ale. Not just a sip this time, a whole cup. It's sour and warm and makes your head fuzzy in a way that feels both dangerous and holy. You sit beneath an elm tree listening to the fiddler's bow scraping joy out of gut strings, and for a few brief moments you forget your back aches and that your tunic smells like goat. The day ends with a bonfire and too much shouting. You walk home barefoot, arms swinging, wondering if this is what freedom feels like. But of course, it isn't. The next morning you're back in the fields, hungover, sunburned. Your father says nothing, just hands you a hoe and points at the weeds. You get to work. Your tasks are more demanding now. You're trusted to work the millstones grinding grain into flour with a rhythm that makes your shoulders throb and your arms sing with pain. You're strong enough to manage the plow if the ox cooperates. You haul buckets from the well without spilling. You're proud of this. But nothing comes without cost. One morning, your back locks up after lifting a barrel. You collapse into the dirt breath stolen from your lungs. Your mother helps you up her hands, calloused, and cool her voice low. You'll live. But don't lift like a fool next time. It's good advice. You've stopped growing up. You're now growing into things, into shoes, into silence, into the steady, unspectacular certainty that this is your life now. You don't dream as wildly as you once did. But you do dream about shade in the fields, about quiet in the cottage, about maybe owning your own hoe one day that doesn't split at the handle. You also get your first real tooth pulled this year. Not by the healer, but by your uncle using a bit of cord, a door latch, and 3 bad jokes. You scream. Then you laugh. Then you bleed into a rag and swear you'll never eat turnips again. You will, of course, by supper. Then comes the day when a wandering entertainer passes through. He wears bells on his boots and carries a puppet shaped like a bishop. He juggles eggs. He sings a song about a knight who wet himself during a siege. You laugh so hard your side hurts. And for one afternoon, the entire village remembers what joy feels like without guilt attached. He stays one night sleeping in the barn and vanishes by morning. You find a copper coin where he sat. You keep it. Not to spend, but to prove he was real. This same summer, you catch your first kiss behind the blacksmith's hut. It's clumsy. It tastes like smoke and apple peels. It changes something inside you. You're not a child anymore. The adults start treating you like one of them, at least when it suits them. They ask your opinion about crops. They expect you to keep the fire going at night. They joke with you in that gruff sideways way that says, "We trust you, but don't mess it up." The priest notices too. He invites you to help ring the bells during holy days. You climb the tower stairs, heart pounding, pulling the rope with both hands as the sound rolls out across the valley. You feel powerful. Briefly. Then your hands blister. You don't complain. You're also allowed to carry a blade now, not a sword, nothing dramatic. Just a small, dull knife for cutting rope or bread. But it feels like a rite of passage. You carve your initials into the wood of your sleeping bench. Sloppy, uneven, but yours. Historians still argue whether medieval adolescents experienced a youth period or simply slid from childhood into adult burdens. There's no single answer. But in your case, it feels like standing in two worlds, one foot still muddy from play, the other planted firmly in labor. You're old enough to understand risk now. You know not to wade too deep in the river. You know when a horse is spooked. You know that sometimes the Lord's men ride into town looking for extra hands, and people don't always come back. Fear becomes familiar, but it stops controlling you. You learn to bluff, to barter, to tell a joke that makes someone laugh before they slap you. These are tools same as the hoe or the scythe. You also notice the world isn't fair. The steward's son trips and lands in manure. Everyone helps him up. When you fall, they laugh and tell you to stop wasting time. The lesson is sharp. Dignity is rationed like salt. Still, you keep showing up. You haul, you harvest. You bow your head when the reeve walks by and raise it again when he's gone. You say your prayers. You pay your tithes. You press on, because that's what peasants do, always have. And in the quiet moments when the sun slants through the cottage window or when the fire crackles just right, you feel something deep in your chest. Not pride, not peace, but a quiet kind of knowing that you're becoming someone the earth might remember, even if no one else does. You're 15 now, maybe 16, and your tunic fits tighter across the chest than it did last year. Your voice has mostly settled low and scratchy in the mornings, though it still cracks when you're nervous, which happens more often now, especially around girls and tax collectors. You've been noticing her for a while. The girl with the soft laugh and serious eyes. She carries water from the well with a steadiness that makes you feel clumsy just watching her. Her braids swing like church bells when she walks. You say nothing, of course. Not yet. You don't have land. You don't have a cow. And you don't have the courage to ask her father if she likes turnips, too. Instead, you throw pebbles at her feet. You help carry firewood when no one's asked. You say something funny during the fair, and she actually laughs at you, not just near you. That's when your stomach flips like bread on a griddle. Courtship in the village isn't romantic in the way ballads sing. There are no secret roses, no moonlit serenades. There's awkward eye contact during Mass. There's bumping into each other during the barley harvest. There's blushing and burping and pretending not to stare. Still, you think about her, while mucking the stalls, while splitting logs, while falling asleep on itchy straw. Your mother notices. She watches you polish your boots with more care. She notices you saving the better half of the apple just in case someone's hungry. She says nothing, just smirks and tells your sister, "He's got the fever." The village dances offer a chance to get close if your hands aren't too sweaty and you don't trip on your own feet. You practice by spinning your sister around the cottage until she's dizzy, and your father tells you both to sit down before someone knocks over the stew pot. But love, or something close to it, must wait, because your days are fuller now. You're expected to make decisions, big ones. Will you ask the reeve for your own strip of land to rent next season? Will you offer yourself as a hired hand during harvest for another village? Will you risk traveling with the merchant's cart to the next town for a few coins? Each choice is survival, and each carries its own kind of risk. Meanwhile, your body keeps betraying you. Pimples, aches, a cough that won't quit. You wake up stiff some mornings, your muscles sore from growing as much as from labor. There's no name for it, just tired. Always tired. And still you push forward. This year brings your first brush with death up close. One of your friends, Thomas the boy with the laugh like a hiccup, falls from a tree gathering fruit and lands badly. He's quiet for days. Then he's gone. The village digs a hole. The priest says prayers. You stand there, fists clenched, staring at the dirt. It's the first time death feels like a mirror instead of a rumor. You stop climbing trees after that. But not everything is dark. You get your first compliment from the blacksmith. Clean line on that cut, he says, nodding at the firewood. It's a small moment, but it echoes in your chest for days. You begin to understand what you're good at. You're quick with knots. You can patch a leak faster than most. You're learning how to listen more than you speak. These things matter. Your father, once distant, now invites you to join him during dealings with the steward. You stand behind him, silent, watching how words are chosen, how respect is balanced with quiet resistance. You're learning not just how to survive, but how to navigate. And the girl. She starts walking beside you when you go to gather herbs, just for a bit, just for the length of the hedgerow. You talk about goats. She teases you about your lopsided haircut. You mention you might have your own garden next season. She smiles. Nothing's promised, not in this life, not in this place. But hope has a way of creeping in through the cracks like sunlight between rafters. Historians still argue whether peasants truly married for love. Some say it was all about alliances, land, and survival. Others suggest that even in a world bound by duty, affection found a way to bloom. You think it's both. You know the reality. If her father approves, and you prove capable, maybe there will be a wedding next year. If not, you'll nod, swallow the ache and keep moving. That's what people do here. Still, when she drops her ribbon and lets you keep it, you tuck it into your sleeve and tell no one. That's enough for now. And so another season turns. You catch rabbits. You mend fences. You laugh with your brothers under a sky so wide it makes your problems feel small. You wake before dawn, eat cold bread, and work until your fingers throb. But in those small stolen moments when a girl's braid brushes your arm, when the barley shifts in the wind just right, when your mother hums while baking something inside you lifts, you are no longer a child, not quite a man, but you're walking the path, one steady step at a time. You're 17 now, and it's official, you're a husband. Not in some grand cathedral with organ music and silk robes. No, your wedding is a muddy, cheerful, half-chaotic affair behind the chapel with wildflowers tucked into your bride's hair and chickens clucking beneath the benches. The priest stumbles over your names, mispronounces something in Latin, and blesses the union with a generous splash of holy water that hits your eyebrow. You blink. She laughs. And that's how your new life begins. There's no honeymoon, just a shared bed in the corner of your family's cottage behind a thin curtain that does little to muffle anything. Privacy doesn't exist here, but comfort sometimes does. She moves in with your family, as is custom. Her mother kisses her goodbye with a tight jaw, and your mother immediately starts rearranging everything she owns. There's tension, of course. 2 women in one hearth. 2 opinions on how to cure a cough or season a stew. But somehow it works. She wakes before dawn, same as you. She fetches water, spins wool, kneads dough. You watch her out of the corner of your eye, marveling at the way she balances a basket on her hip, how she whistles softly when she thinks no one's listening. You're still awkward, still unsure of how to hold her hand in public or whether she likes you humming while you chop wood, but you learn. One evening, as the fire burns low and everyone else sleeps, she presses her forehead to yours and says, "You snore." And just like that, the last bit of your boyhood is gone. The seasons don't stop for newlyweds. Spring arrives fast. The thaw brings mud that sucks at your boots and floods the path to the well. You patch the roof with straw, your wife handing you bundles while balancing precariously on a ladder that creaks like a haunted door. You both laugh when it collapses. No one's hurt, just muddy. Your father gifts you a plot, small, uneven, but yours. The soil's been stubborn for years, but with enough compost and whispered curses it starts to yield. You plant cabbage and barley. You spend hours bent at the waste fingers buried in dirt, talking to the seeds like they're old friends you're trying to coax into staying. That summer, your wife tells you she's with child. She says it softly, eyes cast down like the news might shatter the world or save it. You feel everything at once, terror, awe, disbelief. Then something else, deeper purpose. You work harder. You trade extra barley for salt. You patch the cradle your father once made. You carve a little wooden bird for the baby, clumsy and misshapen but full of heart. The child comes in late autumn. It's a long labor. Your wife bites down on a strip of leather sweat soaking her brow, while the midwife mutters prayers and prepares the cord. You wait outside, pacing until the cries come. First hers, then his. A boy. You name him John, like your grandfather. The priest blesses him 3 days later. You carry him back from the chapel yourself, bundled in linen and hope. Now everything changes. You rise before the sun to check the snares, then hurry home to help with the feeding. You butcher your first pig alone. You mend the roof again when the wind tears half of it off. Your wife tends the hearth with one hand and cradles the child with the other. You're tired in a new way, bone-deep, constant quiet. But it's worth it. You watch your son sleep and think I must build him something better. You also start paying more attention to the miller. He's definitely skimming flour. The scales are wrong. You mention it quietly to the reeve. He shrugs. That's how it is. It stings. You don't have the power to change the system, but you can sharpen your awareness. And maybe your sickle, just in case. One cold evening, your wife falls ill. A cough at first, then fever. You stay by her side, wiping her forehead with damp cloths, whispering stories you barely remember from your own childhood. The baby cries. You hold him with one arm, feed her broth with the other. She recovers. Slowly. But not everyone does that winter. The neighbor's eldest boy dies from a rotten wound. The old thatcher doesn't wake up one morning. A girl from the next village succumbs to the cold while carrying firewood. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant life was as brutal as it seems. Some say records exaggerate the hardships. Others believe the opposite, that suffering was so routine it went mostly undocumented. You don't need a record. You have eyes, but you also have joy. When your son laughs for the first time, your wife clutches your hand and whispers, "He sounds like you." When he takes his first steps wobbling toward the breadbasket, you shout so loudly your mother nearly drops the soup. These moments matter. And when the reeve comes collecting, raising the tithe without warning, you hold your temper. You give what's due. You grit your teeth and whisper to your wife later, "Someday I'll outlive all of them." You say it not with anger, but with determination. You've built something, not a castle, not a name carved into stone, but a family, a rhythm, a future. And as the winter closes in again and the hearth glows soft against the dark, you sit with your wife and son beside the fire, his tiny fingers wrapped around yours, and you feel something rare. Not happiness exactly, but enough. You are 23 now, and your days are full of repetition. You wake in the gray light of dawn, when the chill clings to the cottage like a second skin. The hearth is cold. Your back aches. But your feet still find the floor. Your hands still find the boots, and your breath white and slow. Still fogs the air as you step outside. You've become a man of routine. Not because you love it, but because it's the only way to survive. Your mornings begin with the grind, literally. You carry your grain to the mill where the wheel turns with the slow groan of wet timber. The miller nods, weighs the sacks, then quietly takes his cut. Always a little more than he should. You say nothing. Everyone knows. But saying something would cost you. Back home, your wife tends to the hearth. Your son is 5 now. He's quick with his hands full of questions and allergic to silence. He follows you like a shadow, asking why the crows caw at noon and whether thunder can crack a roof. You tell him what you know, or what you think you know. Sometimes you lie a little because he looks up to you, and you haven't the heart to say "I don't know" too many times in one day. Your land is producing better now. You've learned how to read the soil, how to feel the rain in your knees. You rotate your crops not because a steward taught you, but because an old woman once said, "Don't feed the field the same thing every year. It gets bored." You believe her. Your livestock's grown too. 2 pigs, a goat, 6 chickens who mostly listen. The dog you raised from a pup now guards the shed like it's a fortress. You named him Ember after the glow he gave your son on cold nights. And your wife, she's thinner now, but sharp as ever. Her hair's shorter, her hands more calloused, but her eyes still crinkle when you surprise her with something small. A carrot pulled early, a flower left on her stool. She never asks for much, which is why you want to give her everything. You've started saving a coin here, a pinch of salt there. You've even hidden a small pouch beneath the floorboards. For what, you're not sure. But maybe one day you'll buy her new boots, or send your son to learn letters, or patch the cottage roof without borrowing tools. The daily grind isn't glamorous. You walk the same paths, hoe the same furrows, hear the same gossip from the alehouse who's sick, who's pregnant, who saw what in the woods. But within that rhythm, you found a kind of quiet stability. Until it shifts. One morning the steward arrives with men in dark cloaks. They carry scrolls, wax seals, and suspicion. There's talk of new levies, of increased dues for the crown. The reeve avoids your eyes. You pay what you must, but it stings. That week you work longer, sleep less. Even your son notices. "Why are your hands shaking?" he asks. "Too much digging," you say. You don't tell him it's fear. Still you press on. You repair a collapsed fence using old cartwood. You trade eggs for wool. You dig a ditch to keep the rain from flooding your garden. You help the widow next door patch her door, and in return she gives you a sprig of mint for your stew. It's nothing, and everything. The village holds another feast this year after a better harvest than expected. You dance with your wife. Your son eats too much and vomits in the bushes. The blacksmith sings a song he definitely shouldn't, and everyone pretends not to hear. You laugh. For real. For the first time in months. Historians still argue whether peasant life was truly miserable or just misunderstood by modern eyes. Some say it was unending toil and oppression. Others suggest that within the limits there was joy, community, resilience. You don't read history books, but you live the proof. You know the ache of hunger, but also the sweetness of stolen honeycomb on your son's birthday. You know the weight of tax, but also the lightness in your chest when your wife laughs so hard she forgets she's tired. The grind continues. You split wood until your hands bleed. You shear the sheep, one of whom bites. You chase a fox from your henhouse with nothing but a stick and a scream. You build a new stool with wobbly legs and pretend it was meant to lean that way. And each night you sit by the hearth, your son curled against you, your wife spinning flax, the fire casting long shadows against the wall. You don't speak much. You don't need to. Because in that silence, punctuated by the crackle of wood and the slow settling of bones, you find something close to peace. It's not rest. Not quite. But it's enough to rise again tomorrow. You're in your late 20s now. Your beard grows thick in winter and patchy in summer, and you've stopped trying to tame it. Your back pops when you wake. Your knees grind when you kneel. But your hands know what they're doing. They move with certainty through habits carved by repetition and necessity. Tying knots, skinning rabbits, counting out barley kernels to make sure no one's stealing more than their share. You've become what people quietly call a good man. Reliable, sober. The kind of man who can be trusted to fix a broken wheel, mediate a neighbor's fence dispute, and still get to the chapel on time. But even good men get hungry. This year, the spring was too wet. The rain fell sideways for days, turning your vegetable rows into a swamp and drowning your onions before they could even sprout. The barley came up late, then patchy, then yellow. You dig deeper trenches for drainage, muttering prayers to saints you're not sure you believe in. Your son helps now, his fingers still small but fast. He's 7, quick-minded, always asking how things work, how water finds its path, how seeds know which way is up. You wish you had answers. Instead, you just smile, hand him a stick and say, "Here, help me keep the crows honest." The harvest that autumn is thin. The peas are dry and bitter. The cabbage full of slugs. The oat crop, your last hope, collapses under a surprise frost in September. Still you find a way. You trade wool for flour. You trap eels in the creek with bent nails and patience. Your wife bakes flatbread with more acorn flour than grain. It's dense. But it fills the stomach. You make it through. But barely. And the village feels it. You notice more hollow cheeks, more borrowed cloaks. fewer candles lit at night. People whisper that the Lord has raised the tithe again, but no one dares say it aloud. The steward watches, the reeve counts, and the miller still skims. You start skipping your own meals once a week, so your son doesn't have to. One Sunday you see your neighbor in the chapel with a bruise on his face. His wife won't look up during Mass. No one says anything. But after the final hymn, you quietly slip him a piece of smoked fish. He nods, doesn't smile, just nods. That night your wife looks at you differently. You don't ask why. But she puts an extra blanket on your side of the bed. In the middle of all this, a traveling friar visits. He's barefoot, soaked from the rain, and half-starved. But he speaks with a fire in his voice. He tells stories of holy men who lived on nothing but nettles, of saints who danced through plague, of miracles found in the kindness of strangers. You listen, arms crossed, heart quietly skeptical. And then he says something that sticks. Charity is not giving what you can spare. It's sharing what you fear you'll need. You think about that for weeks. Still the hunger gnaws. So you hunt more, fish more, dig deeper into the woods than you ever have before. You find mushrooms you're not entirely sure are safe. Your wife boils one and waits an hour before letting your son eat it. He lives. You mark the tree. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly faced famine year after year, or whether these stories are exaggerated by monastic chroniclers looking for drama. But you don't need a record to tell you this much. There are days when your belly feels like a hollow drum, and every sound echoes too loudly inside your chest. You survive on rhythm, on movement, on the hope that next year will be better. And sometimes it is. That winter, your neighbor's goat gives birth to triplets. He gives you one. You name her Clover. She eats your wife's herb patch chews through your son's boot and becomes a permanent nuisance. But she gives milk. That spring the rains pause. The barley grows tall and thick. The cabbage survives. You dig the first potato from the edge of your plot, an experiment someone told you about 2 years ago, and it's small, misshapen, and the most delicious thing you've ever eaten. You cry over a potato. No one sees, except your wife. She squeezes your hand and says, "Next year, plant twice as many." And so you do. You keep moving forward. You patch your fence. You scold your son for swearing in front of the priest. You kiss your wife on the forehead when she least expects it. You chase the dog out of the henhouse with a broom and a string of curses. And one evening, as the sun spills like honey across the fields, you sit beside your son and say, "This land has taught me more than any priest ever could." He doesn't understand. Not yet. But he will. Because hunger comes and goes. Seasons rise and fall. Lords demand and fields respond. But within the ordinary, within the daily grind, the shared bread, the patched roof, there is a kind of sacred persistence. And you are the keeper of that rhythm. You are the quiet engine of survival. You are 35 now, and it feels older than it sounds. Your knees creak like cart axles in the morning. Your hands, once quick and nimble, now stiffen in the cold. The calluses have deepened. The lines on your face have spread like cracks in old wood, and your hair, what's left of it, no longer bothers to grow with any enthusiasm. Still, you rise. Because you always have. And today, someone else does not. It's your neighbor. The one who shared salt with you when your son had fever, who once lifted a beam off your leg after the storm collapsed your shed. You find him in the field flat, on his back, eyes skyward and empty. You carry his body home with the help of 2 others. The priest says the rites that evening. Your son lights the candle. Death is never convenient. It comes in the middle of planting season, or in the first snow, or just when someone finishes building a new roof. It doesn't wait. It doesn't ask. The village gathers to dig the grave just as you always do. You use the same spade your father used, the same motions, the same silence. Afterward, people return to their homes quietly. A few share bread. One woman sings. But mostly, it's the kind of grief that doesn't show itself, just hangs in the air like smoke. You sit by your hearth that night, your son asleep beside you, your wife mending a tunic with the same needle she's used since before he was born. You feel older, heavier, and not just in body. You think about your own end more now, not in fear, but in practicality. Who will inherit your land? Will your son remember how to dig the drainage ditch just wide enough to keep the roots from rotting? Will he remember to salt the beans before storing them? You teach more now, not with lectures, but with gestures, with quiet correction. Not like that, like this. You guide his hands on the plow. You show him the trick for sharpening a blade with river stones. You explain how to read the clouds, how to judge the weight of a cow's breath before it calves. He listens, mostly. He's still young enough to daydream, to ask questions about stars and fairies and whether the moon is following him again. You let him believe it is. This year, a traveling peddler brings news from the cities. There's talk of war, of taxes, of rebellion in the north. Someone mentions that the king himself is ill. You pretend not to care, but you do. Because when kings cough, peasants bleed. Taxes rise again. The steward arrives with a new ledger, and the numbers aren't in your favor. You argue, calmly, firmly. He doesn't budge. You pay. You're not surprised. But it still burns. Later, the reeve offers you a quiet moment of truth. They say the Lord's debts are high. Even he fears the crown. It doesn't help. You tighten your belt, double your traps, and ask your wife to use less flour in the pottage. She already has. Still, there's dignity in perseverance. You survive another winter. The snow hits hard in early December, and the wind howls so fiercely it shakes the shutters loose. You and your son nail them back in place with frozen hands, both of you laughing, not because it's funny, but because the alternative is crying. You catch a cold that month. It lingers. Your wife makes you a poultice of thyme and lard. You hate the taste, but you drink it anyway. Your son watches eyes wide as if you might vanish in the steam. You don't. Spring arrives late, but with it a surprise. Your wife is pregnant again. You're stunned, happy, terrified. You do the math in your head and realize your next child might be born after you're 40. You sit with that number a while. It feels absurd and sacred. Your son doesn't know how to react. He pokes your wife's belly with a stick and asks if the baby will like beans. You hope so. You plant extra just in case. There's another death that year, a girl in the next village over. She was 15. Fever took her in 2 days. People whisper about plague again, though no one's sure. The priest says it's God's reminder to stay humble. The healer says it's bad air from the bog. Your wife says it's just luck, good or bad. Historians still argue about medieval medicine, whether it was wholly superstition or if there were pockets of useful knowledge. You've seen both. You've chewed bark that worked better than prayers, and prayers that worked better than poultices. This year, you also see something you never thought you would. Your son disobeys you, not with malice, just defiance. He wants to trap a fox, even though you told him it's too risky. He does it anyway. The trap fails. The hen is killed. You yell, loud enough to scare him. Then you sit with him beside the pen and explain why you were scared, not angry. He nods, says sorry, then brings you a feather and says, "It's not all bad." You keep the feather. You're no longer just a man working the land. You're the memory keeper, the storyteller, the one they come to when someone's sick or stuck or lost a tool. You don't know everything, but you know enough. And when you walk through your plot, barley swaying in the breeze, the goat trailing behind your son skipping ahead, you feel for once like the land knows you, like it might remember you when you're gone. You're nearing 40, though no one counts that high out loud. You've made it well past the age most peasants are buried with a wooden cross and a loaf of bread. Your neighbors call you solid. The children call you sir without being told. And when someone mentions your name, they do it with a nod instead of a joke. Your daughter is born on a wet morning in early spring. The cottage smells of damp wool and boiled herbs. Your wife is silent for most of the labor, gritting her teeth. Eyes shut the lines around her mouth, deepening with each contraction. You sit outside, fingers laced, praying in your own clumsy way. Not the priest's Latin, but something older, earthy, personal. You ask for breath, for strength, for mercy. When the child finally cries, you do too. She's small, wrinkled, red as a beet, but her lungs are strong. The midwife says she'll live. You believe her. Your son is enchanted. He stares at his sister like she's a creature from a fairy tale. He tells you he'll build her a little bench so she doesn't have to sit in the mud. You help him cut the wood that afternoon, and life moves on. You plant more this year. Potatoes, carrots, even a patch of leeks you're not sure will take. You mend the chicken coop, chase a fox away with a pitchfork, and trade an extra pail of goat's milk for beeswax candles. You're still tired, but you're still here. Your daughter giggles at birds. Your son builds traps. Your wife hums while she spins. And for the first time in years, you feel a stretch of peace, not loud or grand, but a gentle quiet that settles in your bones. Then the rumors come. Someone's horse came back without its rider. A steward was found dead near the crossroads. A village to the west lost half its children in 1 week. Whispers of plague. You remember the last time. You were barely old enough to understand, but you remember the coughing, the pits dug too shallow, the silence. Now you clean everything more carefully. You burn herbs in the cottage. You keep your family close. The priest walks from house to house offering blessings with a sprig of rosemary instead of holy water. The fear is thick in the air like smoke with no fire. But the sickness doesn't come. Not this year. The healer says the wind favored you. The priest says God smiled. Your wife says, don't question it. Just be grateful. So you are. You begin to teach your son how to read the tally marks on the wall, how to tell when a sheep is pregnant, how to patch a cloak without wasting thread. You teach him how to sharpen a blade, how to speak without bowing too low, how to say no when someone pushes too hard. You're not just raising him. You're preparing to leave him something. You take him to the edge of your land and say, one day this will be yours. He looks at the furrows, the fence, the old tree stump that marks your grandfather's corner and nods like he understands. He doesn't. Not yet. But the weight of it lands on his shoulders all the same. You also start noticing the young men in the village looking to you for answers. How deep should I plant the onions? What do you do when your wife's too quiet? Is it better to cut the timber before frost or after? You answer as best you can. You try not to sound like you know everything, because you don't. But you do know what works, what breaks, and what people regret. Historians still argue whether peasant fathers had a strong role in family life. Some claim they were distant, buried in labor. Others insist they were active, instructive, deeply involved. You don't know how others lived, but you are present. When your daughter cries, you carry her. When your son falters, you steady him. When your wife looks at you with that tired weight in her eyes, you stir the pot and let her rest. One evening the reeve comes by. He's older too, thinner. He tells you there's talk of moving borders again, redistributing land for the new steward's plans. You listen, then shake your head. This plot's been mine since before he wore a hat, you say. He shrugs. I told them you'd say that. Nothing more comes of it. But the tension lingers. You keep a closer eye on your fences. That winter is harsh. The wind claws through every crack. The fire needs feeding twice as often. Your fingers swell from frostbite in December. But no one goes hungry. You planned well. You rationed. You helped your neighbor fix his barn in exchange for an old sack of barley. The rhythm of life continues. Your son begins helping other families, repairing roofs, hauling wood, offering quiet strength. People start calling him by your name like a title passed down. He doesn't notice. But you do. And your daughter. She talks now, asks questions like arrows. Why is the moon always watching? Why do bees die when they sting? Can chickens dream? You tell her, yes, but only about corn. She laughs like music. And one night, as the fire dies low and the cottage breathes in its slow, familiar rhythm, you realize something simple and extraordinary. You're not just surviving anymore. You're part of something lasting, something rooted. And though you know the days ahead may still be hard, though you expect more deaths, more taxes, more aching mornings, you also know this. Your name, though not written in books, will be carried in calloused hands in stories told beside the hearth in rows planted just right, in your children and in theirs. You're over 40 now, though nobody says that out loud. In the village, that number carries weight like a roof beam that's somehow still holding after too many storms. You're no longer just him or the man with the goat. your master not by title, but by lived-in respect. And with that respect comes taxation. The reeve visits again, new demands, a tithe on salt, a gift of labor for the Lord's road repairs, a second levy for the local abbey's new bell tower. You hold your tongue, but your grip on the fence post tightens until your knuckles go white. Later that night you curse under your breath while sharpening your scythe. Your wife doesn't interrupt. She just brings you broth and sits nearby spinning wool in rhythm with your anger. Your son listens. He's 15 now, taller than you were at his age, stronger too. You watch him lift a full sack of grain with ease and wonder when exactly his shoulders began to carry more than just weight. He's clever, more than you ever were. He built a second chicken coop this spring without asking. It doesn't lean. He doesn't brag about it. He just nods when the hens take to it. And when the old widow down the lane needed her thatch fixed after a thunderstorm, he went without being told. You see in him a new kind of man, one who's learned from your labor, but not burdened by your fear. You pray the world doesn't punish him for it. Your daughter is 6 now, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued. She tells the priest his robes look like a goose feather dipped in wine. He laughs harder than anyone else. She gathers flowers for your wife every morning, calls them miracles with roots. You wonder how she sees so much beauty in a world full of mud. You catch yourself dreaming more often these days, not the wild dreams of youth, but quiet, practical ones. A second goat. A patch of rye behind the cottage. Maybe a tool shed with a door that actually closes. You begin building it with your son on the first clear day of spring. The two of you work in easy silence, occasionally interrupted by your daughter bringing honeyed water or the dog chasing chickens underfoot. It's simple, good, the kind of day you hope gets remembered long after you're gone. But not all days are kind. That summer, the miller is caught cheating again. This time it's not just flour he's skimming. It's weights, money, confessions whispered during ale-soaked nights. A few of the younger men want to confront him, your son among them. You pull him aside and say, "There's justice and then there's timing." Know the difference. He doesn't like it, but he listens. The miller's cousin, a steward's clerk, intervenes. Nothing happens. Nothing ever happens. But you sleep that night with one ear open and your blade closer than usual. The world changes, but only slightly. You begin helping the priest tally the village births and deaths. He says your memory is sharper than his ledgers. You help mark boundaries before planting season. You're asked to bless the first furrow in the north field, not because you're holy, but because you've earned it. Your voice isn't louder now, just steadier. People hear it even when you whisper. And still the daily life continues. You repair boots. You collect ash for lye. You help your wife patch the quilt your mother made before the last frost took her. You hum while you work. You didn't used to. One chilly morning, your daughter finds a hedgehog under the woodpile. She insists it's a sign of luck. You don't disagree. That evening, you leave a small dish of milk out. Just in case. Your wife begins coughing more often. Not constant, but persistent. You make her tea from dried elderflower and thyme. She tells you not to worry, but you already are. You've seen this before. You stay up later now, stoking the fire, even when it's warm. She scolds you for wasting wood. You smile and say, then cough quieter. She laughs and keeps coughing. Historians debate whether love bloomed in these small corners of medieval life, whether marriages were practical pairings or true partnerships. You don't need parchment to tell you. You know love when you see it, and you see it in the way her hands still reach for yours in the dark without looking. You think often about what you'll leave behind. Not wealth, not land worth envying, but something better. You've raised 2 children who know how to work, how to share, how to listen. You've kept a home standing through frost, famine, flood, and fire. You've carved a life from dirt and willpower, and in quiet moments when the fire's low and the dog's breathing deep and slow, you feel something you never used to believe in pride. Not the kind that swells, the kind that rests. And when your son comes in from the field, his hands covered in dirt, his face flushed from effort, and he looks at you and says, I think next year we should plant barley there. You don't just hear a plan. You hear continuity. You hear legacy. And you nod. Because it's his turn now. Almost. Not yet. But soon. You are 45. Maybe 48. Truth is, nobody counts that high with any confidence anymore. Not even the priest, and he has ink. What matters is this. You've lived long enough for your son to be called a man, and for your daughter to outpace you down the path with a bundle of kindling balanced on her shoulder like it weighs nothing. And you've become something of a landmark. People greet you by name in the fields. They ask your advice without needing permission. Your back bends more than it used to, but your word straightens others. Then the sky turns. It begins with a frost. Late. May should bring rain, not ice, but the wind shifts wrong and kills the first sprigs of green. You watch the bean sprouts collapse in rows like tired soldiers. The barley goes yellow at the tips. You kneel, touch the soil, and feel the truth before anyone says it out loud. The harvest won't be enough this year. And then comes the comet. Red, long-tailed, hanging low in the sky like a wound. The whole village gathers to watch it. No one speaks. Your daughter asks if it's a dragon. Your son tells her it's a message. You just squint, cross yourself, and whisper the same thing your mother whispered during storms. Whatever it is, may it pass quickly. But it doesn't. A rash of sickness strikes the village within a week. Not plague, nothing so fast or final. Just a slow, creeping thing. Fevers, lethargy, teeth falling out, no clear pattern. The healer calls it bad blood. The priest calls it judgment. You call it what it is, a reckoning. Your wife gets it first. She hides it for days. Pretends she's just tired. But her appetite fades. Her laughter dries up. Her footsteps soften like she's moving through water. You feed her broth. You speak gently. You keep the children at bay, not out of fear, but reverence. This is not the end. Not yet. But you feel the path slope downward. Still she works. She always does. Even when she's too tired to sit upright, she spins thread. Thin and tight, like she's trying to bind herself to the earth a little longer. And then your son gets the idea. We march to the manor, he says. At first, you think he's joking. Then you realize he's angry. Not reckless, not loud, but deeply, calmly furious in a way that makes your chest tighten. He gathers the other young men, not with threats, but with facts. They take more every year, and now our mothers starve. They listen. You tell him to wait, to think, to plan. He nods, then marches anyway. You follow. The walk to the manor takes half a day. 20 men, 2 women, 3 dogs, pitchforks, a broken banner from last harvest painted over with charcoal. Enough. You remember your own father's fear during the last revolt, how he told you to hide when the Lord's riders came. You remember his silence when they took 2 men from the village and didn't bring them back. Now you stand at the gates of the manor, your son beside you, your daughter watching from behind a tree with wide, unblinking eyes. You expect guards, but instead you meet the steward. He's soft-handed, pale, with ink stains on his cuffs, and no boots fit for mud. He listens. Then he speaks. Not with kindness, but with patience. That's worse. He promises to review the situation. He says, "We understand the burden." He offers nothing. You walk home in silence. No one speaks of rebellion again. But something's shifted. Not in the manor, but in the village. In you. Your son digs new ditches by moonlight. Your daughter learns to set snares. You take your wife's place in the garden, planting one-handed while holding her with the other. She leans on you now, light as a bird. The sky turns orange earlier each day. The nights grow longer. You prepare the root cellar with more care than ever. You wrap the grain sacks in oiled cloth. You patch every leak in the thatch with your own hands. When the first snow comes, it feels too quiet. You sit by the fire, your wife asleep in the chair beside you, your son sharpening tools, your daughter stitching a doll she swears is for someone else's child. You believe her. But you also know the doll's hair matches her own. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had any agency, whether they could ever push back, or if they merely endured until they vanished from records. But here in your hearth-lit silence, you know the truth. You resist by surviving, by planting even when the soil is thin, by loving even when the world is cruel, by teaching even when the words catch in your throat. And so you keep going. You tuck your daughter in with a story about a girl who grew flowers on a frozen hill. You tell your son that rebellion sometimes takes the shape of staying put, and you press your wife's hand one more time just to make sure she's still warm. You're past 50 now. Nobody remembers your exact birth year, not even you. Your joints ache before it rains. Your hearing dulls around the edges. You used to chase foxes out of the henhouse. Now you just bang a pan from the doorstep and trust they remember who you are. Your beard has grayed mostly at the chin. Your wife's hair, once the color of chestnuts in sunlight, is now streaked with silver and always tied back tight, partly for neatness, partly to hide how much she's changed. But she still moves with purpose, even if it's slower now. Your son oversees most of the labor these days. Not officially, but everyone knows. He organizes the planting walks the fence lines at dawn and fixes the carts before anyone else notices the wheels have warped. He still asks your opinion, but less and less. That's how you know he's ready. And one day, he tells you he's marching again. not with pitchforks. This time, with words. There's a meeting, he says. Other villages. We'll speak to the steward as a group. If we stand together, they can't ignore us. You stare at him. He's not bluffing. He's done waiting. You nod once. But don't follow. Instead, you sit by the hearth that afternoon, whittling a spoon from a scrap of oak. Your daughter is singing to herself near the window, stringing dried apples onto a bit of twine for winter storage. Your wife dozes with a blanket over her knees, lips parted just slightly as if still whispering instructions in her sleep. The cottage is quiet until the door swings open. Your son enters flushed from the walk, eyes blazing. They listened, he says, breathless. The Reeves backing us. The steward said he'd send word to the manor. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Okay, he grunted. But that's something. It is. Small victories still matter. That night over stew that tastes mostly like onion and memory, you raise your cup and toast your son, not for rebellion, but for wisdom. He blushes. Your daughter rolls her eyes. Your wife just smirks. Later, you sit outside under the stars. The night is clear, cold. Crickets chatter like distant drums. You light your pipe cough once, then let the silence stretch. You think about your father, your grandfather, the names you never knew buried in land records, long lost to fire or time. You think about the men who bent their backs so yours could straighten. You think about your son. And you remember something the friar once said years ago when you were a boy who still believed comets were dragons. True change comes slow, he muttered over bread and ale. Sometimes it arrives like thunder, but mostly it creeps in with muddy boots and a stubborn heart. You didn't understand it then. You do now. In the days that follow, things shift subtly but unmistakably. The steward sends a rider with new parchment. The taxes will hold steady this year. The manor is considering giving each village more autonomy to manage its own fields. Nothing is promised, but nothing is taken either. That alone feels like a miracle. You help your daughter build a drying rack for herbs. You show her how to twist the twine just so, how to space the bundles to keep them from molding. She thanks you with a kiss on the cheek and a crooked little cake that tastes exactly like flour and effort. You eat every crumb. Then one morning, a strange sight on the road, a man in fine boots, walking alone, carrying a roll of parchment and a wax seal. He's a clerk from the abbey come to hear from respected villagers. You're one of them, apparently. You sit with him on the bench outside the chapel. He asks about harvests, weather, sentiment. You answer slowly with long pauses, making sure every word is a nail he can't easily pull out later. You don't trust him, but you make yourself heard. Historians still debate the effectiveness of medieval peasant uprisings. Most were crushed, they say, forgotten. But what they miss is what happens after. How people remember who stood firm. How small concessions once given are hard to take back. And how voices once raised don't so easily go quiet again. Back in your cottage, life resumes. The fire crackles. The goat bleats. Your wife fusses about the stew being too thin, and your daughter says it just needs more love. You laugh. You still laugh. That may be the biggest rebellion of all. And as the season turns, Once more harvest done, grain stored, windows shuttered against early frost. You look at your family around the table and feel something you don't have a word for. Not pride, not hope. Maybe continuity, maybe quiet justice. Maybe just the simple truth that against all odds you're still here, and so are they. And that's enough. You wake before dawn to the weight of yesterday's choices pressing in your chest. The revolt is over, fizzled out as quickly as it ignited like embers scattered by a careless foot, and though no pitchforks came for you, you still feel the tremor beneath your boots. You slip into your tunic, the cloth still stiff from yesterday's sweat and mud, and step outside into a world that looks almost unchanged. The barley fields stretch in neat rows the same as before, though now you see them with different eyes. In the distance, the manor's gate stands silent. No riders, no riders' threats, only squirrels skittering along the hedgerow. Life moves on. They say peasants always return to tilling the earth wiser, wearier, and sometimes walking with a limp. You're lucky to have escaped with all your bones intact. Many in history lost much more. Revolts were dangerous. In 1381, the English peasants' revolt saw rebels executed by the thousands, just one example of how quickly hope can curdle into bloodshed. Historians still argue whether smaller uprisings had any lasting power, or if they were simply footnotes to noble rebellions beyond your village's borders. But here your memory counts more than any chronicle. Your son greets you at the gate with a nod, though his eyes hold questions. He wears the same patched tunic you gave him last season. His shoulders no longer carry only tools, they carry responsibility too. You place a hand on his arm and feel his muscle beneath. He's not afraid. You're proud even as your heart flutters with doubt. You taught him to stand up, and now he must learn when to yield. Back home, your daughter watches from the doorway, clutching Clover's lead rope. The goat senses the tension and nuzzles her hand. You pat the animal's wool and glance at your wife, who stands by the hearth, arms folded, silent. She caught the fever you feared, but she's stronger than many, and her cough has faded to a rasp. You wonder if today's quiet reprieve is a mercy or a lull before another storm. The reeve approaches, baton in hand, with that same pale smile you've grown to read. He says, "You've shown remarkable restraint." You nod, though his words taste like ash. He offers no reward, only half promises that the Lord will consider changing the levy. That's as close to a pardon as your village will ever see. You accept it not out of gratitude, but because you must. You head to the fields, son beside you. The soil is soft from recent rains. You kneel, fingers brushing the topsoil, counting the days until planting. You speak quietly to the earth, an offering of words, not prayers asking for mercy this year. Your son mimics you, tracing the furrows with his fingertips, learning the language you've spent a lifetime mastering. Lunch is a quiet affair of cold bread and cheese, eaten beneath the old oak where the villagers once gathered. Someone left straw hung with tattered cloths, tokens of peace or truce you can't decide. You bite into the bread, the crust barely crackers, and you taste something bitter. Regret, maybe, or relief. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes. Afterward, you visit the church. The midday bell tolls 6 booms echoing through the valley, each one a reminder of how few rings happen for common folk. Inside, the air is thick with incense and damp stone. You kneel in a back pew while the priest reads from a worn psalter. You don't believe as you once did, but the ritual soothes in its rhythm. You make the sign of the cross more out of habit than hope. On your way out, you stop at the grave of old Marwick, the man who died in that first fever 2 years ago. You lay a small sprig of rosemary on the marker, quaint fringe herbalism they call it, and whisper, "We remember." It's a tiny act of defiance against oblivion. Returning home, your son greets you with news the next village to the west is debating whether to send a petition to the Lord's Council. They want fairer milking dues and fewer corvée days. You see that spark again, the same one that led your own march. You keep your voice low and say, "Let them gather more support." Strength in numbers, remember his eyes gleam. You hope he remembers restraint as well. The afternoon wanes. You repair the tool shed's door, hammering in a new latch, while your daughter gathers wildflowers to brighten the windowsills. Her laughter flits through the air, a reminder of why you fight not for glory, but for moments like these. The wind carries the scent of fresh hay and distant rain. As dusk falls, you light a single candle by the hearth. Shadows dance across the walls, flickering memories of every face you've known, every life you've held. Your wife brings you a bowl of pottage, thin but warming. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. There's no formal celebration tonight. No speeches, no songs. Just the soft clink of spoon against bowl and the steady breathing of those you love. You step outside, look up at the stars, and hear the earth sigh. The revolt is behind you now, a chapter closed, but its lessons etched in every line on your hands. You know revolts may come and go, but survival demands something more: patience, wisdom, a willingness to stand firm without breaking. Inside, your family sleeps. Tomorrow the fields will need tending, the taxes will need paying, the goat will need milking. History may forget your name, but the land will remember your footsteps, and your children will carry that memory forward. And that is the closest thing to a pardon you will ever receive. You are nearing the end, well into your 50s, though you no longer distinguish years by numbers. You measure time by children-grown roofs mended, and how many seasons the barley has turned gold beneath your hands. Your son now stands taller than you ever did. His children follow him at your heels, their laughter echoing across the field. Your daughter has married well enough, land a sturdy husband, and promises kept. You helped her pack, kissed her cheek, and watched her leave like a bird flying off the branch you once built for her. The cottage feels emptier now. Your wife's cough has become a quiet companion. You hold her hand in the mornings and carry wood for her at night. You speak less, listen more. You've learned that comfort often comes in silence. One afternoon, you notice the dog lying longer than usual in the sun, eyes half closed. You bend down, scratch behind its ear. It doesn't stir. You feel a familiar sorrow coil in your chest loss, standing at the doorstep once again. That evening, you dig a shallow grave beyond the garden fence. You cover the dog softly, place smooth stones atop the soil, and say a quiet farewell. No prayers, no tears, just gratitude for a life lived for loyalty, unmatched for lessons taught in the wag of a tail. The next day, the new steward's son arrives. He's a city boy, clean boots, proud gait, no respect for soft earth under his nails. He looks at your fields, your fences, your tired hands, and asks, "Why tend this land so faithfully when it gives so little back?" You pause, weathered hands on the fence post. You study the furrows, the sprouts, the ridge your father once carved. You think of every sunrise you caught, every seed you sowed, every life you cradled in this cottage. You answer simply, because it remembers. He blinks at you, maybe expecting a sermon or a scolding. Instead, his shoulders slump and he nods in acknowledgement of something he's never known. That night you stand by the gate and watch the fireflies gather in the meadow. You feel deep in your bones that this land it holds memory better than parchment. It carries every footstep, every sorrow, every joy. And so do you. You have lived a life ordinary to the world, extraordinary to those who walked beside you. Your mark won't be in grand hall or stone pillar, but in the quiet persistence of seeds that sprout each spring in the stories whispered beside hearths you've warmed in the legacy carried forward by family and neighbor alike. You've worked, loved, resisted, endured, and in doing so, you've become precisely what you set out to be: a keeper of continuity, a testament to survival, a voice for the voiceless earth beneath your feet. The final chapter unfolds without fanfare as your hair silvered and your hands gnarled remind you all stories must end. You wake to cawing crows and mist drifting low over fields you've tended your whole life. Your back aches, a gentle reminder that every plank, every ridge, every stone has been laid by your labor. You sit by the hearth watching embers glow weakly. Beside you, your wife sleeps, her breathing shallow but steady. Your children and grandchildren sleep in the adjoining room, their dreams unmarked by the weight of history. You rise and step outside. The morning air is crisp. You walk the familiar path to the old oak stump, the marker of your grandfather's corner. Moss covers the base, carvings worn smooth by seasons. You trace the lines with a trembling finger, imagining every hand that pressed here before yours. You kneel in the earth, planting a final bulb, late blooming lily your wife favored. You cover it gently, whispering, "Grow on." You stand lean on your staff and look across the fields one last time. Barley waves in salute. The cottage smoke spirals upward, a silent smoke signal to everything you've tended. Stewards' riders pass by and doff their hats. They see you not as laborer or rebel, but as something older, a grandfather of the soil. No words are exchanged. None are needed. You return home and sit with your family. There's no grand feast, only simple bread, cheese, sweet honey from a friendly neighbor's hive. Someone lights a candle for every decade you've lived. You count them silently and blink back tears. You speak once, softly. Thank you. The words hang in the air like birds' wings. Your wife takes your hand. Your son rests his head on your shoulder. Your daughter places a flower behind your ear, wild and bright. You close your eyes, heart full. Outside, the land breathes. The wind sifts through barley, through reeds, through memories. And you, just one life among many, touch the earth, grateful for its embrace. Now drift into calm as the day's burdens unwind. Let the soft murmur of barley in the breeze carry you away, each stalk a whisper of seasons past. Your body, once bent and calloused, becomes as weightless as a feather resting on a quiet pond. Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat slow, matching the gentle flicker of the hearth's last flame. Imagine the warmth of the cottage, the glow of embers, the faint scent of herbs lingering on the walls. The low hum of family breaths, a chorus of contentment, lulls you deeper. Each breath in draws the earthy comfort of worn wood and sun-baked soil. Each exhale releases the echo of toil, pain, and triumph carried off like leaves on a gentle stream. Recall the milestones, the first breath by the hearth, the clapper in small hands, the tender kiss of a daughter, the cry of a newborn son. Let these memories flow like golden threads through your mind, weaving a tapestry of quiet purpose and steadfast love. There's no need to rush onward, no need to chase the seasons any longer. In this twilight of memory, every detail softens, the rattle of tools in the shed becomes a lullaby, the murmur of the wind a soothing lull. Allow your thoughts to drift beyond time's guardrails, where fields stretch endless, and the heart remembers only what sustains it. Here nothing demands more of you. No ledger, no levy, no whisper of revolt, only the gentle pulse of life's simple grace. So rest now. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your dreams weave new stories from the soil, stories of peace, of harvests, without hunger, of laughter growing wild among golden fields. And as sleep enfolds you, remember this: you were more than a peasant. You were a keeper of continuity, a quiet hero in the grand tapestry of the land. Sweet dreams.